Without light, we would have no experience of color. When a light source reflects light waves off of an object, surface, or atmosphere, the wavelength of the light reflected back into our eyes is then translated by our brain as color information. What does that mean for us as humans? And what does that mean for us as creatives? Our human eyes can see the visible light spectrum, which includes a limited range of wavelengths between approximately 380 and 750 nanometers wide. This is the rainbow. Although color can be measured and classified within scientific terms, color is the most relative medium in art. Color is alluringly deceptive, and herein lies much of its magic. The best magic trick occurs while we are unaware of the fact that we are even witnessing one. Color tricks our eyes and brains in infinite ways without us even catching on. With that said, light waves do not actually contain any color at all. Color exists only within the perceptions of the brain. And therefore, if a tree falls in the forest on a pitch black night, that tree is pitch black as well. When we accept that color exists only in the brain, we can begin to understand the relativity of color perception more easily. Color is not a thing independent of our experience of it, but rather a perceptual response, like taste or pain. This may sound silly. Perhaps you're thinking grass is green, the sky is blue, oranges are, well, orange. But this can be a problem. However, as we attempt to use color for creative expression, it's referred to as color constancy. When we believe that a color is associated with a particular object, our eye surrenders to our brain. It's incredibly challenging to put our preconceptions aside and discern colors accurately. Here's a great example from David Hornung's book. All 3 pieces of paper are white. And none of them are white. French Impressionist painter Claude Monet experimented with various subjects and through painting studied the effects of light on color. His scientific approach resulted in surprisingly accurate red haystacks of late afternoon. And the changing colors of Rouen Cathedral. Monet rejected the idea that hay is yellow and explored his perceptions to discover that cathedrals can in fact change color. When he developed cataracts later in life, Monet's palette changed dramatically, and once he finally agreed to ocular treatment, his famous color sense was substantially restored. When we study the visible spectrum and call a color by its name, we refer to its hue. Red, for example, is not one fixed color, and when we view the hue continuum organized as a circle, we see the dynamic range of each hue. Recognizing that each hue actually occupies an entire zone of the spectrum is very useful in sharpening our color distinctions. Once we honor the difference between the warm, fiery red near orange and the cool magenta red near violet, it seems less appropriate to name that entire color range with just one simple word. When referring to warm versus cool colors, those terms are actually as relative as the colors themselves. We typically consider blue to be a cool color, but some blue hues are far warmer than others. Time for a color experiment. I gathered some objects from around the house, and my brain told me that all of these things are light green. When I put them together for my eyes to compare, I do realize how different these light greens really are. Notice the differences in intensity, value, and temperature. My green banana seems quite yellow within this context. But if I place a warmer yellow object near it, aha! Now my banana appears to be green again. Now, what if I made a painting with only these greens that I see in front of me? What would the overall effect be if I did that? How about adding an element of contrast, perhaps the complementary color to green? Oh, that bell pepper really steals the show, but perhaps I wanted to. It is a glorious pepper, and that is my decision to make. Otherwise, swapping the red element for an orange, it still gives me a warm focal point. It still gives me that contrast, but in a slightly subtler way, since orange is a little closer to green on the spectrum. And the contrast is going to be subtler than that if I swap that orange element for a yellow one. And that is because yellow is even closer to green on the spectrum. Here's an example of an arrangement where I've kept some of my greens but incorporated more neutral tones like grays and browns, and that helps to highlight the vividness of my green by balancing it out with more of a desaturated anchor. Here's another arrangement, introducing some of my greens to a selection of blues. And of course, this new relationship evokes a different visual response. Also, I realize how cool my blue journal really is, with this very warm blue glass bottle superimposed on top of it. The two objects are both vivid and they're both blue, yet they contrast each other substantially because they vastly differ in temperature as well as value. This information can be overwhelming, but don't let it discourage you. Instead of taking color for granted, we must push aside our preconceptions and strive to truly see what is in front of us. Josef Albers, abstract painter and teacher, studied color interactions in great depth, and his book Interaction of Color has been enhancing the way that we perceive color since it was published in 1963. Here's a design from his book. Compare the two small squares. Is the bottom square darker than the top square? Does one seem closer to orange than the other? Or does one seem more like it could be brown? They are actually the exact same color. Here, I'll fold it for you. Wow. And so all colors are affected by the colors around them, but so are we, psychologically speaking. About 10 years ago, Coca-Cola sold its regular formula cola in white cans, but consumers perceived a change in the flavor. Amid much confusion and outrage, Coca-Cola went back to red cans only 1 month later. Since the 1880s, companies have been dyeing white margarine yellow to appeal to butter enthusiasts. Most of us still can't even believe it's not butter. Many restaurants use warm colors, like tones of red, orange, and yellow, for their logos, signage, and decor, as they have been proven to induce hunger. In the 1930s, Louis Cheskin discovered what he referred to as sensation transference, which is incredibly useful in selecting packaging materials for increased product sales. His experiments on consumer perceptions proved that he could increase the lemony flavor in 7-Up soda simply by adding 15% more yellow color to the can. Color not only influences what we buy, but how and if we live. In the late 2000s, Japan began installing calming blue lights at the end of its major subway platforms, which resulted in an astounding decrease in their suicide rate. Pink has also been proven to have profound impact on human psychological and physiological responses. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, Alexander Schaus conducted experiments that showed a specific tone of pink, called P618 or Baker-Miller pink, to be incredibly powerful. Viewing this specific tone of pink lowers one's heart rate, pulse, and respiration, and affects muscle strength, while also substantially decreasing hostility, aggressive behavior, and erratic actions. Correctional facilities began painting confinement cells with P618 pink for its effects on prisoner behavior. This earned the color an interesting nickname, drunk tank pink. So, considering the hidden sedative power of the color pink, we cannot ignore its presence in what sociology refers to as gender differentiation. Our modern tradition of marinating young girls in pink serves as a notable tool for social classification and assigned gender identity. So, do we give girls pink objects in response to their feminine qualities? Or could we be possibly doing so to encourage or influence them? Once we're aware of the inner impact that certain colors have on the mind and body, they become useful tools of language and expression. Using many intensely vivid colors in one's artwork is comparable to writing a story in all underlined capital letters, or playing every instrument in the band simultaneously at full volume. Not always appropriate, yet not always inappropriate. My advice is to experiment. Conduct tests and hold up those colors next to one another before utilizing them in your work. Observe carefully how they interact, just like words in a sentence, and whether we wish to evoke harmony or intensity. We can do so with control and intention. As the non-objective painter Vasily Kandinsky poetically stated, color is a power which directly influences the soul. Color is the keyboard, The eyes are the hammers. The soul is the piano with many strings. The artist is the hand which plays, touching one key or another to cause vibrations in the soul. As we delve deeper into observing color relativity and experiencing color in action, we can focus more clearly on which keys of that piano we wish to strike.